We live in an age of convenience. With a few taps on a screen, we can order food, avoid traffic, automate tasks, and even delegate parts of our thinking. The allure of the easy path is everywhere, and it's hard not to indulge. But at some point, I realized that leaning into the path of least resistance had come at a cost. I was mentally soft, emotionally stagnant, and perpetually procrastinating on the very things that could transform my life. It wasn't a crisis that pushed me to change. It was the quiet, creeping dissatisfaction of knowing I could be more, but I wasn't. I decided to stop running from discomfort and instead train myself to lean into it. Over a year, I rewired my mind to love doing the hard stuff. And in doing so, I changed the trajectory of my life. This is the story of how I did it and how you can too. Why we avoid the hard stuff. Before I could tackle complex tasks, I needed to understand why I avoided them. It wasn't because I was lazy, though I often labeled myself that way. It was deeper, psychological. Challenging tasks usually mean delayed gratification. The reward is received later, not immediately. Uncertainty. You may fail or not achieve the expected result. Effort. You'll expend energy, and your brain prefers conserving it. Our brains are wired for survival, not success. Comfort equals safety from an evolutionary standpoint. So when we're faced with tasks like waking up at 5 a.m., going for a run, studying, or confronting someone about a thorny issue, the brain throws up resistance. That resistance is a form of self-preservation. But in the modern world, it often works against us. Step 1. Changing the narrative. I started by changing the stories I told myself. I used to say things like, I'm not a morning person, I hate working out, I'll never be able to do that. Each of these thoughts reinforced a fixed mindset. They became self-fulfilling prophecies. So, I flipped the script. I'm becoming someone who thrives in the early morning. I love how I feel after a workout. Difficult things grow my strength. This wasn't about lying to myself. It was about shifting my identity from avoider of discomfort to seeker of challenge. Your brain listens to the words you use. Speak in a way that empowers you to act, and eventually, you will. Step 2. Embracing micro-adversity. Loving hard stuff doesn't mean you suddenly run marathons or start businesses overnight. I started with minor discomforts, what I call micro-adversities. For examples, taking cold showers, deliberately choosing the stairs over the elevator, fasting for a few hours beyond my comfort zone, waking up 15 minutes earlier each week. These actions were insignificant in isolation, but collectively, they trained my brain to see discomfort not as a threat but as a training ground. I wasn't just doing hard things, I was becoming someone who does hard things. The magic of micro-adversity is that it builds discipline in layers. It's how a muscle grows by pushing just a little further than the day before. Step 3. Building the dopamine bridge. The hard stuff is often dull or painful because the reward is distant. But I learned a trick: bring the feeling of reward closer. I call this building a dopamine bridge, connecting the arduous task with a positive emotion in the moment. Here's how. Pair effort with music. I'd listen to energizing playlists during workouts or focus sprints. Use a mantra. During discomfort, I'd repeat affirmations like, "This is how I grow," or "Pain is temporary. Pride is forever." Gamify progress. I'd track streaks and celebrate small wins with rewards, a movie night, a treat, a new book. This rewired the dopamine system in my brain. Instead of only chasing easy hits, like social media or junk food, I started associating effort with satisfaction. Step 4. Systemizing discipline. Willpower is fickle. It fades. What replaced it for me was systems. I created an environment that made difficult things easier to accomplish and made easy things harder to access. I laid out my gym clothes the night before. I blocked distracting websites during work hours. I kept my phone in another room while I read or studied. I also began using a calendar with strict time blocks for deep work. No negotiations. No excuses. Once it was on the calendar, it was sacred. This removed the need to make decisions constantly. I didn't ask, "Do I feel like doing this?" because I knew the answer would often be no. I did it because it was scheduled, just like brushing my teeth. Step 5. Seeking friction on purpose. Once I built some momentum, I started actively seeking out friction. That meant taking the more challenging route in decisions. Volunteering for things that scared me. Choosing the task I most wanted to avoid first thing in the day. Each time I did this, it felt like lifting a heavier mental weight. And just like with physical weightlifting, I got stronger. What I noticed is that people around me started reacting differently. They'd say things like, "You're always so on top of things," or "You have incredible self-discipline." However, I didn't feel disciplined. I felt aligned with the identity I was cultivating. Step 6. Reframing pain as the path. A turning point came when I began to see pain not as an obstacle but as evidence that I was on the right track. This mindset shift was massive. Previously, I'd take pain or struggle as a sign to quit. Now, I saw it as a signal of growth. Pain became data. If a workout hurt, it meant I was pushing my limits. If a conversation was awkward, it meant I was being honest. If a task felt overwhelming, it meant I was expanding my capabilities. I wasn't trying to eliminate pain. I was learning to coexist with it and even welcome it. Step 7. Falling in love with the process. Perhaps the biggest rewiring of all was detaching from results and falling in love with the process. Hard things often have delayed payoffs. You don't get fit after one gym session. You don't master a skill in a week. You don't earn trust or success overnight. I began focusing on the daily reps, not the distant reward. This made it easier to stay consistent. I adopted what I call the craftsman mindset. A craftsman shows up, day after day, regardless of the outcome, because the act of working itself is fulfilling. Once I embodied that mindset, hard things stopped feeling like chores. They became rituals. Results: who I became. A year into this journey, the external results were notable. I lost 15 pounds and ran a half marathon. I launched a side business that now generates meaningful income. I built an intense morning routine and started journaling daily. I read more books in a year than I had in the previous 5 combined. But the internal results were even more profound. I became someone who could trust myself. I stopped negotiating with excuses. I found joy in pushing limits. I felt alive. Most importantly, I no longer feared discomfort. I embraced it. What this is not. Rewiring your mind to love hard stuff is not about hustle culture or toxic productivity. It's not about burning out or working 18-hour days. It's about reclaiming your agency. It's about choosing the hard path when it serves your long-term growth, not your short-term comfort. It's also about self-respect. When you consistently show up for complex things, you send a message to yourself: I'm worth the effort. How you can start. You don't need a life overhaul. Start small. Here's a blueprint. Choose one hard thing each day, something small that you usually avoid. Notice your resistance and lean into it with curiosity rather than judgment. Track your wins, no matter how minor. Celebrate effort, not just outcomes. Reframe discomfort as evidence that you're on the growth path. And most importantly, be patient. Rewiring your mind isn't an instant switch. It's a slow rewiring. But once it's done, it's permanent. The gift of hard things. We often think of complicated things as the enemy. But they're the greatest gift. They reveal who we are. They build who we want to become. They teach us resilience, focus, and self-mastery. Every meaningful transformation in my life came wrapped in the packaging of difficulty. Now, I don't wait for motivation. I don't seek comfort. I seek challenge because I know it's the forge where the best version of me is born. So, if you're waiting to feel ready, stop. Start doing the hard stuff. You don't need to love it at first. Just do it consistently. And one day, you'll wake up and realize, you do love the hard stuff. Because it made you who you are.